In a world that is addicted to noise, silence is often mistaken for emptiness. We live in an era where every thought is broadcast, every emotion is validated, and every plan is announced before it is executed. You have been conditioned to believe that to be heard is to be powerful, and that to be visible is to matter. But the ancient masters of Japan understood a different truth, one that is terrifying to the modern ego. They knew that silence is not a lack of something. It is a weapon of immense strategic weight. When you speak, you reveal your position. When you are silent, you become unmapped territory. You become a void that your enemies cannot target and your peers cannot manipulate. Chapter 1. The Economy of Power. The samurai viewed *ki*, or life energy, as a finite resource. They believed that unnecessary speech was a dissipation of this energy, a leak in the vessel of the spirit. Miyamoto Musashi, the sword saint who remained undefeated in 61 duels, did not waste words. He understood that in combat, as in life, the man who is trying to explain himself is the man who is already losing. To explain is to seek validation. To seek validation is to admit that you do not have authority over your own reality. Consider the modern individual, whom we shall call Victor. Victor was a man of high intelligence and ambition, yet he suffered from a subtle form of weakness, the compulsion to narrate his life. When Victor had a new business idea, he told his friends immediately, seeking their approval. When he felt slighted by a colleague, he vented his frustration to anyone who would listen. He believed he was communicating, but in reality, he was hemorrhaging power. By externalizing his internal world, he gave everyone around him the blueprint to dismantle him. He was a fortress with the gates wide open, wondering why he felt so defenseless. Chapter 2. The Dissolution of Mystery. Victor's downfall came during a critical period in his career. He was vying for a promotion against a rival who was less talented, but far more disciplined. Victor, in his anxiety, talked constantly. He spoke of his strategies, his worries about the market, and his personal sacrifices. He thought he was building rapport. In truth, he was becoming predictable. In the philosophy of war, predictability is death. His rival, on the other hand, practiced a form of *Moku*, or disciplined silence. He listened, he observed, and he kept his cards pressed tight against his chest. Because Victor had broadcast his intentions, his rival knew exactly where to strike. When the final decision was made, Victor was passed over. He was shocked. He had the better numbers, the better ideas, and the better track record. But he lacked *gravitas*. His constant chatter had made him seem lightweight, frantic, and insecure. He realized too late that people do not respect what they can easily understand. They respect the enigma. They respect the mountain that stands silent while the wind howls around it. Victor had become the wind, noisy, transient, and ultimately ignored. Chapter 3. The Practice of the Void. Devastated by his failure, Victor retreated. He began to study the Book of Five Rings, specifically the Book of the Void. He read Musashi's teaching. By knowing things that exist, you can know that which does not exist. He realized that his noise was a cover for his fear of the void. He was afraid that if he stopped talking, he would cease to exist in the minds of others. He made a vow to undergo a transformation. He would stop feeding the world his energy. He would embrace the silence. The first few weeks were excruciating. Victor had to fight the dopamine-fueled urge to chime in during meetings, to correct people, or to fill awkward pauses in conversation. He practiced *ma*, the Japanese concept of negative space. When asked a question, he trained himself to pause for 3 full seconds before answering. He stopped offering unsolicited opinions. He stopped complaining about the weather, the traffic, or the workload. He treated his words like gold coins, rare, heavy, and only spent when absolutely necessary. Chapter 4. The Accumulation of Pressure. A strange phenomenon began to occur. As Victor withdrew his voice, his presence expanded. By containing his energy, he built up an internal pressure that others could feel. This is the concept of haramitsu, the state of holding one's power inside, like a dam holding back a river. In meetings, when Victor finally spoke, the room went quiet. Because his words were scarce, they became valuable. People began to look at him with a mix of curiosity and intimidation. They projected their own thoughts onto his silence, assuming he knew more than he did, assuming he was calculating a master plan. The rival who had once defeated him now became unsettled. He tried to bait Victor into arguments, tried to get a reaction, but Victor gave him nothing. He simply looked at him with the distant gaze of the warrior, seeing everything, but reacting to nothing. The rival, starved of the information and emotional reaction he was used to getting, began to make mistakes. He overextended himself, trying to fill the silence that Victor had created. Victor watched him unravel, realizing that silence acts as a mirror. When you do not react, people are forced to face their own reflection, and often they cannot handle what they see. Chapter 5. The ultimate sovereignty. To walk the path of the warrior in the modern age, you must reclaim the sovereignty of your mind. You must understand that you are under no obligation to make sense to anyone. The need to be understood is a childhood survival mechanism, not an adult strategy for power. When you explain yourself, you are submitting your actions to the judgment of another. When you are silent, you are the judge. This does not mean you become a recluse or a mute. It means you become a sniper. You speak only when the shot is clear and the impact is guaranteed. You stop leaking your intentions. You stop seeking the cheap comfort of venting. You build a cathedral of silence inside yourself, where you can retreat to think, plan, and sharpen your will. Musashi died in a cave, alone with his thoughts, leaving behind a legacy that has lasted 400 years. He did not achieve this by being the loudest voice in the room. He achieved it by having the strongest spirit. The world is noisy, and it is weak. If you want to be strong, you must disconnect from the chatter. You must become the deep ocean that absorbs the stone without a ripple. Silence is not empty, it is full of answers. Silence is not a retreat, it is a weapon. Use it.